Hello there, everybody. This is a re-recording of our class on Hesed and Gevurah that originally took place on July 21st. I wasn't satisfied with the session. I felt that it was too abstract and not connected enough to the body, and so I've decided to re-record it. So if you were there with us on the 21st, then this is a little bit of additional content for you. I'm going to tackle the themes that we explored what was yesterday from a little bit of a different angle. And if you weren't there, you might choose to watch this session instead. And I will tell you that your presence was missing, part of why I feel that we weren't able to bring the material down into the reality and into the body is because we didn't have the vibrant class discussion that I've become spoiled with you all. So I want to start with some warm-ups, a song and two stories. And the goal here is to bring us into the themes of the class, Hesed and Gevurah, and we'll touch on how they come together into Tiferet as well. To bring us in from a couple of different angles. We're spiraling here, so we're going to spiral around it and spiral around it. And the reason for that is that in the largest sense, this is a class about containers, about building the container. What do I mean? Our class last week, and really the weeks preceding that as well, we've spent a lot of time tuned in to Ein Sof, to relating to divinity from the perspective of the infinite, the limitless, which, the Zohar tells us again and again, Ein Sof is the true essence of divinity. What's most true is everything is God, source, energy, most certainly us included. All distinctions are illusion. Any effort to capture with language the expanse of divinity is missing the mark in one way or another, because the true essence of divinity is Ein Sof. And yet we know we live in the world. We live in this here and now. We live in this body. And so we need to reconcile that seeming contradiction. Why is it when I look out at the world through my senses, why do I perceive the world as being of the multiplicity, not of the radical unity? And why do I perceive myself as separate? So Kabbalah is a grand attempt to answer that question. And today's class takes us a very important step forward in that answer. As we've said, the upper three sfirot that we explored last week, Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, they are located within the Godhead. They are barely manifest at all. They're part of the core architecture of manifest reality. They are the radical expansiveness of Ein Sof, conceiving of the possibility of creating, crafting the blueprint that will become the template for creation, forming the womb that will birth creation. But practically speaking, nothing has happened yet in those upper three of Keter, Chokhmah, Binah. Your Keter is the part of you that has never left the radical unity of all that is. And I hope you had a chance to drop into that, to taste it a little bit if you worked with the meditation that I sent out last week. But today we make the transition. We travel through that invisible sphira of da'at, which you saw David and I debating about last week. We leap through the chasm from ayin, nothingness, to yesh, stuffness, isness, and we come out on the other side in what is beginning to be manifest reality. And so today's class deals with the question, how is it that Ein Sof becomes manifest? How do we feel it? How do we see it? How do we know it? And today's class is going to give us two answers to that question. The first and most important answer is that we know it through love. When we look around, feel our way around the world, the substance that teaches us the most about Ein Sof is love. And anyone who's been in love knows this, right? Anyone who's been in love knows that that sense of love, it defies time and space. It fills us with a sense of empowerment that is unparalleled. We lose our own sense of limitations and of boundaries. Our ego drops away, or it can drop away, right? At least in those first moments. Love is maybe the most useful metaphor for Ein Sof. It competes with light, and yet, I don't know, when I'm comparing love and light as useful metaphors for Ein Sof, in the end I go with love. Because it's proof that there are aspects of manifest reality that are real, even though they have no measurable, even though they don't take shape in matter. They are profoundly, profoundly real. So the first answer to the question, how does Ein Sof make the leap into manifest reality? The first answer, from the perspective of Hesed, is unconditional love. The second answer, from the perspective of Gevurah, is almost a technical answer, which is divinity must be channeled to be experienced. It needs vessels. Divinity takes shape in vessels. And for the purposes of our course, we need to know that the most relevant vessel for us is our body. Our body is designed as a cosmic vessel meant to receive Ein Sof, and we become transmitters of that. And we'll come back to that in the second half of the class. I promised us a few warm-ups. First, a warm-up from Hesed. I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to play for you 1 minute of a video of Rabbi Menachem Creditor singing really the song that made him famous, which he was doing a meditation on the Psalms. We repeat several times in the Psalms the phrase in describing God that we say about God, Ki leolam chasdo, that the world is the recipient of, the embodiment of, the proof of God's chesed. That God is unconditional love, chesed, and the world is a testament to that. Ki leolam chasdo. So Rabbi Creditor is doing a meditation on these words, and he just spells out for us exactly how chesed comes to play. He sings in English, I will build this world from love. I am a vehicle of chesed. You must build this world from love, you too. And if we build this world from love, then God will build this world from love. So it's a beautiful interpretation. I'm going to play 1 minute of it for you now. We can just sort of use this as a little bit of a meditation. Close the eyes and just take it. All right. So, all right. So I promised now 2 stories. So I want to tell us 2 stories also by way of woman. You'll see in today's class, we're going to be talking about hands and eyes. And both the right eye, left eye, our capacity for perception, lenses through which we view our lives, both the eyes and the hands as their energy centers in the palms that tap into the energy center in the heart. They're both useful locations to embody Hesed and Gevurah. And if we think about the grand Kabbalistic tree of life, we can think about it energetically when we go like this. Right? So when we go like this, truly actually Hesed is here and Gevurah is here. Okay? But we're going to be playing with eyes and hands. So first, a story about eyes, and then a story about lessons. So there's a story that's told in the Talmud, in Masechet Shabbat, about the reported author of the Zohar, Shimon Bar Yochai. And the story of origin of the Zohar is that it was that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai composed it when he was hiding from Roman rule for 13 years in a cave. The way the story goes, he was bad-mouthing the Romans, and they got wind of it. And so he and his son fled to a nearby cave. They dug a hole in the ground, and they buried themselves inside of it. And by expression of blessing, a stream opened up right next to them so that they would have fresh water, and a carob tree sprouted so that they would have food. And they spent 13 years just like that. They would take off their clothes, they would bury themselves in the ground, they would spend all day studying Torah, and for our origin story, composing the Zohar, reaching highest heights, and they would only get out to pray. And on it went for years and years, until finally one day Elijah was sent to the mouth of the cave to let them know that the emperor had changed, they were no longer wanted men, and they could come out of the cave. So this is a story about what happened when they came out. So they emerged from the cave, and they're walking about in the world, and they come upon a farmer tilling a field, working, just plain old working. And they turn and they gaze upon the farmer, so filled with the impacts of this highest heights, deepest depths Torah study, and immediately fire comes out of their eyes, and they set the field on fire. And in that moment, a divine voice, a bat kol, a divine voice comes out, and it says, "Get back to your cave." And so they're sent back to the cave for another year to think about what they did wrong. And they leave again after a year. And at that point, they're again walking about in the world. And the Gemara says that as they look about the world, the younger Rabbi Elazar Bar Yochai, everything his gaze falls upon is lit, is burned up. But the elder, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, famed author of the Zohar, is able to, everything he sets his eyes on, is able to extinguish the flames of the younger. So this is an incredible story, and it's a perfect warm-up for us, for Hesed and Gevurah. Gevurah are eyes of fire. They are our capacity, our divine capacity for judgment, for looking at something and saying, no. It is where punishment comes from. And the world can't take it. It can't take it. Eyes of fire burn the world down. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's ability to put out the fires of his son are eyes of love, eyes of chesed. And so this story gives us this balance of these two attributes. What is it like to gaze at the world from the perspective of stern judgment? And what is it like to gaze at the world from the perspective of unconditional love? And how deeply the world needs both. Since I've told you a story from the Gemara, these postures, they're also captured for us in the teachings around the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. You know, this is not one of the stories I was going to tell you, so now you're getting a bonus story. So there's another story, and this one I bet many of you have heard. It's the story we tell about conversion. There's a man, and he decides he wants to be part of the Jewish people, and he goes to the great Rabbi Shammai, forefather of the rabbinic tradition, and he says, "Teach me the whole of Torah while I stand on one foot." And Shammai sends him away. And then he goes to the great Hillel, and he says, "Teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot." And Hillel responds to him with the teaching that is Rabbi Akiva's most famous teaching, and it's Jesus's most famous teaching, and Hillel says it a little bit differently. He says, "What is hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. The rest is commentary. Now go and study." So if we can think of Shammai as the perspective of Gevurah, din, judgment. Shammai is associated with holding a measuring stick. He is the perspective that says the world has order, structure, expectations. It's like my ruler here, and I can hold it up right next to you, and I can tell you, how do you measure up? And Shammai is unconditional love. He is the teacher who will tell an ugly bride she's beautiful, because really aren't all brides beautiful. And he'll accept the convert, saying that the essence of Torah is being loving. The way that Rabbi Akiva says it and Jesus say it, they quote Leviticus. They say, "Love your neighbor as yourself." So, right? So that the essence of Torah is love and study. Now go and study. So we have also in these architects of the rabbinic tradition, on one side, the Gevurah, din, judgment, the judge, the structure of the world, legal system, and on the other side, unconditional love, and the world can only survive with both together. So this idea that the world can only survive with a balance of din and rachamim, it is essential for us today. I mean, in this class, in this conversation about these two sefirot. It's essential in Kabbalah. It becomes the foundation of what we know as the Lurianic creation myth. When folks just begin to start to study Kabbalah, often the very first thing that they hear, that they learn, is the idea of tikkun olam, repairing the world by gathering sparks. So this concept of turning the idea of tikkun olam, which is a phrase that exists, as early as the 9th century in Jewish texts, the idea of repairing the world, the core metaphor of Judaism. This is something that's offered to us by a later Kabbalist, the Ari, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria. It is the story that he tells for the creation of the world, which has really become a central part of Kabbalah, and I'm going to retell it to you now in a moment. But what I want to be sharing with you right now is that the Ari is picking up on themes that we have at the oldest layers of Judaism, well before Kabbalah. So first, the Lurianic creation myth. The Lurianic creation myth goes like this. Once upon a time, there was only grand supernal light, and there arose within the Creator the desire to become manifest and birth the world. And so that the Creator became a searing, piercing essence of light that burst forth into the world. But that light was so powerful that it shattered the vessels that were meant to contain it. And those fragments are spread throughout the cosmos as the initial first attempt at the creation of the world. And only then, after that first shattering, or maybe in some sources we read actually again and again and again, the world has to be created, the divine constantly working to craft, to find a container that can sustain the immensity of divine light. Only after previous attempts is this world that we are in created with a container sturdy enough to hold divine light. But our container contains all the fragments of that initial organuz, that hidden supernal light, pure divinity. And the Lurianic Kabbalah says that it is our mission as seekers, as healers, as Kabbalists to move about the world, discovering fragments of pure divine light and removing them from their protective, hiding masks, coverings, and setting them free so that they can join again the Creator. So that is the Lurianic creation myth. But the Ari is basing his teachings on an earlier textual tradition. And this is what I want us to look at together. I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to put the curriculum packet up on the video. However, in your curriculum packet, I gave you have this text as quoted by the Sfat Emet, but I want to look at it today from its original sources. So, for as long as Jews have been studying Torah, we have noticed that when we open the Torah and we read the very beginning of Genesis, we should notice two things. The first is that both Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, they both are stories of creation. The Torah has two creation stories. The story that we maybe are most familiar with sort of in contemporary discourse of the world created in 7 days, that is the story that's told in chapter 1. That is a story, by the way, that goes with the attribute of Gevurah, Din. It is the creation, it is the imposition of order on chaos to create known reality. That is the posture of Din, of Gevurah, of one of the two sefirot we're exploring today. So that's the creation story that we read in Genesis chapter 1. But Genesis chapter 2 tells us an entirely different story, the story of the Garden of Eden. Now, of course, Jewish commentators will say that these two stories are actually one. One is the general telling, and one is the more specific telling. So we can tidy up this contradiction. But on the face of it, the Torah tells us two creation stories. That's number one. Number two, when we look closely, we notice that the name of God that is used in the first creation story is Elohim, which is the name of God associated with divine justice, with Din, which is what we've been talking about. I'm just scrolling here because I gave you that first creation story. So you see here, Bereshit bara Elohim. Elohim is Din. However, in the second creation story, the one told in Genesis 2, which I didn't bring you in your source packet, the name for God that's used there is Adonai, Yud He Vav He, which is associated with Rachamim, with Chesed, with the second of the two spheroids we're exploring today. So this seeming contradiction is noticed by anyone who's been studying Torah closely in Hebrew for a long, long time, including the noticing of it is preserved both in what's known as the Midrash, which are story type interpretations on the 5 books of Moses, on Jewish tradition, but primarily the Hebrew Bible. And it's also preserved in the Talmud, which both Sikta Rabati, this source that you're looking at here, and the selection from the Talmud Menachot that you have below it, they both are sources that are about 1,500 years old, which is to say they precede the Zohar. You know, I feel obligated, since I mentioned Shimon Bar Yochai, of course there's academic consensus about the Zohar, that the Zohar actually dates to the 13th century Spain. But the transcriber of the Zohar, Moshe de Leon, claims that he discovered it, but that it was written by Shimon Bar Yochai. So that was just a little detail back there. Okay, so this idea that there are 2 creation stories, one from the perspective of Din, one from the perspective of Rachamim, it goes back really far, and it's preserved in the Midrash, and it's preserved in the Talmud. So here we have the quote from the Midrash. Initially, God intended to create it, being the world, with the attribute of justice. But then God saw that the world could not exist with justice only, so God gave priority to the attribute of mercy and joined it with the attribute of justice. So this is from the Midrash, and the Talmud says it just a little bit differently. He says, so the Talmud is always a collection of discussions. It's like the court transcript of rabbis talking. So here we have a discussion between Rav Ashi and Rabbi Yehuda, who's the son of Rabbi Eli, taught the verse. 4, in Be'yah is God an everlasting rock, is understood as followed. I'm going to quote for you a verse that says Be'yah, Yud He, short for Yud He Vav. The term Tzur Olamim can also mean creator of worlds. The simple translation is rock of the world. But here the Gemara wants to interpret it as creators of worlds. Why plural worlds? Be, Ya, in Yud He. These letters Yud and He that constitute the word Ya are referring to the 2 worlds that the Holy One, blessed be He, created with the letter He. One with the letter He and one with the letter Yud. I do not know whether the world of Kram was created with the Yud and this world was created with He, or whether this world was created with He and that world was created with Yud. Okay, so already this should be sounding to us a lot like Kabbalah, right? Because we're getting a play here on Yud He, creating worlds. Now, it's a tiny bit confusing for us because I hope that we're going to end this class today by doing a meditation on Yud He Vav He. And in that meditation, we're going to allow the upper Yud and He to signify Keter and Chochmah Binah, whereas here, Yud and He are signifying Elohim and Adonai. He associated with the feminine, also Yud He Vav He for short. We say Hashem, we write it He. Hey apostrophe. Sorry, that was my Hebrew calling it a chupchik. Hey apostrophe. And Yud associated with the masculine, and we're associating that with Elohim here. So anyway, these things are all a little bit mixed together because the tradition is from the Talmud, not from the Zohar. Because for us, in our class today, we're going to allow Hesed to be masculine and Gevurah to be feminine. So anyway, it's a little bit swirled together here. But what I want you to see is that these traditions are old. They go back a long, long way. Okay, so let's make some order here. Today, we are talking about Hesed and Gevurah. The attribute of Hesed is divine, radical, compassionate love, as Rabbi Creditor was singing about. And you can feel your way into it in the body through the right hand and the right eye. The right hand being the hand, what we're thinking about this, if you want to just extend your hand, this is giving in generosity. This is extending out through unconditional love. This is the type of generosity that comes when I'm plugged into source and I'm constantly just being filled up by the Creator. Then I know that there's no limit to what I can give out. I am an ever-flowing stream, receiving and giving, and receiving and giving. Now, I have to give you a little bit of a feminist spin here. I want to share with you that, right-handedness is more prevalent in humans than left-handedness. And as a result, in many wisdom traditions across religions, including the two we're drawing from here, the Vedic tradition that gives us the concept of the chakras, and the Jewish wisdom tradition, there is an association with right-handedness, with the sun, and with all the good stuff. And left-handedness and passivity and the moon and all the bad stuff. So for example, the left side, the Zohar will just easily flow for us between calling the left side the side of the Divine Mother Binah and Gevurah, and the left is the feminine, and then just as easily it'll switch and it'll say, no, the left is the Sitra Achra, the left is Lilith, the left is the world of demons, the left is the source from which evil comes. So the Jewish wisdom tradition does this too. And as a feminist, I have to tell you, I push back on that. And beyond the scope of our course, in my own practice, for me, my experience of the Sefirot works on a spiral. They revolve. And often for me, that right-left is flipped. And so when I work with Chesed, I don't only work with it on the right, and I don't think the right is best, and I don't think that male is good and female is bad. So that's just a moment feminist sidebar. But for the purposes of laying out the tree of life, Chesed is indeed on the right. And we can feel our way into it through the generous hand that gives, which we'll think about as the right hand. And with that gaze, Hillel's gaze, and the gaze that extinguishes the fires of judgment that Shimon Bar Yochai learns to cultivate. The second sefirah that we're working with today is Gevurah, sometimes called Din. It is the divine capacity for judgment. And we're going to work with it this week also as creating boundaries. We said that the Torah opens with the story of the radical mess, chaos, tohu vavohu. This really, I think the most useful metaphor here is to think about the primordial goop that precedes the Big Bang, or that immediately follows Big Bang, but before if we just read Genesis 1 as an abbreviation of the process that science describes as evolution, because the two have far more in common than they have contradiction, as long as we just let that idea of 7 days go, because the Torah didn't mean it anyway as 7 days. So the first chapter of Genesis begins by telling us about the pre-existing, dazzling darkness, the depths, and the imposition of order on those depths through the process of separating. So that process of creating order through separation, this is the posture of Gevurah. This is the cosmic ability to create boundaries, and it is the prerequisite for everything, for us. It is the answer to how and why is it that we have a sense of separate. and also a sense of me, right? If there was no separate, there would be no you, and there would be no me, and there would be no self-consciousness, and there would be no love consciousness of the other. So that actual process of separating, erecting boundaries, that is Gevurah. We are playing with it on the left. It is the left home. It is the gaze of the left eye. And then, of course, acknowledging, you might join me in picturing these things as a spiral, right? But it's here. And just to remind us again, we have the radical, wide open, receiving of limitless Ein Sof, pouring in a supernal light. And then we have the chasm of jumping from Ein to Yesh, from Ein literally means nothingness, but the non, the pre everything, pre-linguistic, pre-label, pre-separate, all that. The jump from Ein, radical, expansive, no thingness, to thingness through the chasm that is Dot. And then we enter into the world. And when we enter into the world, what do we have? We have an interplay of cosmic, divine, unconditional love pouring through the containers that can hold it. That container is called Gevurah. So right now, I want to read to you a source from the Zohar that describes this for us. And I want you to just take it in. You know, the Zohar is best read as poetry. It's best read as poetry. So I want you to just listen along with me. I'm not even going to share my screen with you, but I want you to take this in as poetry, okay? So you might close the eyes. I'm just finding it. Oh. Now, this source isn't in your curriculum packet, but if you just shoot me an email, I'm happy to send it to you. All right. But I'm reading from the second volume of the Zohar, page 122b to 123a. You can just take this in as poetry. And I want you to hear the themes we've been talking about. We're going to get the metaphor here of the eyes. It is taught in the mystery of mysteries. The king's head is arranged according to Hesed and Gevurah. Hairs are suspended from his head, waves upon waves, which are all extensions, and which serve to support the upper and lower worlds. Princes of princes, masters of masters, masters of truth, masters of balance, masters of howling, masters of screaming, masters of judgment, masters of mercy, meanings of Torah, and secrets of Torah, cleanliness and uncleanliness. All of them are called heirs of the king. And that is to say, the extension that proceeds from the holy king, and all of it descended from Atika Kadisha. So that was the Zohar's recapturing again of that process of emanation. Atika Kadisha, the upper three we did last week, and this was again an articulation of the birth of all of the spirit. The forehead of the king is the accounting of the wicked. When they are called to account because of their deeds, and when their sins are revealed, then it is called the forehead of the king. That is to say, Gevurah. It strengthens itself with its judgments. It extends itself to its extremities. This is different from the forehead of Atika Kadisha, which is called Ratzon. The eyes of the king are the supervision of all. The supervision of the upper and lower worlds. All the masters of supervision are called thus. There are different colors joined together in the eyes, and all the masters of supervision of the king are given the names of the colors of the eyes. When the supervision of the king appears, the colors are stimulated. So this is a Hesed in the eyes. The eyebrows are called the palace, which assigns supervision to all the colors. The masters of supervision. These eyebrows in relation to the lower regions are eyebrows of supervision that derive from the river that extends and emerges, and they are the place which brings influence from that river in order to bathe in the whiteness of Atika, in the milk that flows from the mother. So now the text here is going to end by telling us, answering our question, how does the radical expansiveness of divinity get down here? This is how. It's like whiteness. It derives from the river that extends and emerges, and they are the place which brings influence from that river in order to bathe in the whiteness of a teacup, in the milk that flows from the mother. For when Gevurah extends itself, and the eyes shine with red color, Atika Kadisha illumines its own whiteness, and it shines in the mother, and she is filled with milk, which flows forth perpetually. This is the meaning of the scripture, bathing in the milk of the mother, which flows forth perpetually, without ceasing. So we have here the Zohar playing with us with this idea of Gevurah and Chesed and Gevurah, as lenses through which the world is perceived, both through which the Creator perceives the world and through which we perceive the world. And it gives this metaphor of eyes changing color. So we can imagine ourselves as Shimon Bar Yochai and his sons. And when we gaze out on the world from a place of love, our eyes change to the colors of love. And when we gaze out on the world through the perspective of judgment, our eyes change to the color of judgment. And the perception stimulates the upper worlds, and the proper stimulation causes divine milk to flow down from Bina so that we can receive it. So let's just close our eyes for a moment and take that in. And just see, if last week we played with receiving Shefa, divine effulgence, we played with it as light. Now let's just see how it feels to play with it as milk. Wonderful. So I want to add a layer for us. As I said, this class was a class of creating containers. And beginning next week, when we move fully into the heart center, we will have created the body. We will have created the body. This class is the creating of the body. And so I'd like to work on that a little bit with you right now. And to do that, I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm actually going to put up a painting that I myself did. I am not at all a professional artist, but I did this painting a long time ago, and I'm excited to share it with you. And so if you look at this here, this is a painting. This is a person dancing, bathed in light. That's what you're meant to see here. But it's also the 4 letters of the ineffable name of God, Yod, He, Vav, He. So you'll see, I hope you can see my cursor too in this screen share. This here is the Hebrew letter Yud, making up the head. This is the Hebrew letter He, the second letter of the ineffable name of God, making up these dancing upper arms. This is the Hebrew letter Vav, drawing down and making up the torso. And this is the Hebrew letter He, making up the lower part of the body, the legs. And the Zohar again and again uses these 4 letters as a way of encapsulating both the Kabbalistic tree of life and the way that it's drawn down from the infinite to manifest reality. And also, just like this painting does here, an overlay on the body, playing with this idea of the Adam HaKadmon and the fact that we are made in the image of God, and that for the Kabbalists, they mean it literally, that we look like God. And so I would like us to take 5 minutes of meditation now, allowing ourselves to be created in this image of God. So we're going to overlay on the body this Yod He Vav He. So I want you to take this meditation as a meditation on this image. So you're going to do an open-eyed meditation. You're going to soften the gaze. So the outsides of your peripheral vision, you're going to soften the gaze such that you can see peripherally, and you're going to be gazing gently on these four letters of the Tetragrammaton, the ineffable name of God. And you're going to consider the Yud as that point of light, that piercing point of light that the Ari told us about in the story that I told at the beginning, which is Keter, which is the upper three, the essence of divinity that is far more limitless than limited. And you're going to imagine the transection of the collarbone, just like the upper parts of this hay, with extended arms out in rejoicing. The upper hay is Binah. It is the womb of the world through which the birth happens. And so you'll feel that in the body. And then visualizing this Vav as the full length of your spine, the drawing down of limitless divinity into this here and now, this time and place, and the particularity that is you. The Vav is the entirety of the lower seven sfirot. Sometimes we talk about the Vav as Yesod only, and we'll come back to that in a later class. But for now, we're feeling it as the full length of the spine, as the manifesting of this particular me in this particular here and now. And if your feet are flat on the floor, feeling them root in, the lower hay is Malchut, Shekhinah. It is your body. It is manifest reality. It is Leit Atar Panui Minei. There is no place that is devoid of God. It is everything that you see manifest that might have struck you as particularity, but that from this perspective we know that the particularity is a grand portrait of divinity. You know, Heschel teaches that the reason that we Jews are prohibited from making idols is not because the idol offends God in any way, but rather that the only physical representation that it possibly could approximate divinity is all of manifest reality. All of it. All of it is the face of Shekhinah, of Malchut, of the divine. So allowing the eyes to close now for just one more moment. Feeling yourself as Yod Hey, Vav Hey, vibrating with the limitless, breathing and dancing in this here and now. And you can let the eyes flutter open. I really encourage you to let this image stay with you as part of your practice for this week. You know, there are wonderful stories about seeing this divine name, which is the name associated with Hesed, with mercy, seeing it on the forehead of others. There's a rabbi in the Talmud who said that he kept his most beloved slave with him because he was the only person that if he gazed on his face, he could see the name of God. And the famous stories of the Maharal of Prague bringing the golem to life. The golem is brought to life by the writing of this divine name on the mud being's forehead. So inviting you throughout the course of this week to see yourself as dancing as these four most powerful letters. And inviting you to see them on the face of those around you and in the bodies of those around you. So a little bit more on the practices for this week. We've already offered a couple here today. On the simplest level, I want you to work with the right hand and with the left hand. I want you to practice giving from a place of unconditional love, feeling that generosity fueled by all of that blessing that you're drawing down. You're just drinking in mother's milk, and that gives you so much ability to give generously with all of those you touch. And with equal reverence, the side of Gevurah is reverence, it's yitzchak, it's awe. With equal reverence, embracing your posture as judge, as a posture of empowerment, that we know ourselves through our boundaries. And so this week I want to challenge you to set at least one boundary. It might be in the area of food. Maybe you're gonna refrain from, I don't know, eating gluten if it gives you a tummy ache, for example, for the week, or refrain from too many sweets, and feel a sense of empowerment of the ability to say no. As a mom, I'll tell you one more story as we're coming to the end of our time. Yesterday, right before class, I had like an epic battle with my 10-year-old during the day. My 10-year-old has gone to a school for all these early years of his schooling that is all about Hesed. It's a school that it's sort of like an Israeli interpretation of Montessori. What I'm about to say is not actually the ethos of Montessori, but this school, it's just all about preserving that divine spark in the child and preserving their love of learning. And it is a school of Hesed. And his whole life in school, he's just had teachers say to him, whatever you want, honey, just do whatever you want. You just let your curiosity guide you and you learn what you feel like learning. And so my sweet little fourth grader, now in a learning context, he just doesn't have any grit. He doesn't know how to do things he doesn't feel like doing. And it's a problem, and it's going to become a problem more and more. So here I'm his mom, and it was me who chose not to break his spirit by putting him in this loving school. And yet I want this kid to be able to read and write. I want him to be able to take on challenges. I want him to have grit. I want him to be able to know that something that's hard is worth doing. And so he needs Gevurah from me. He needs boundaries. He needs limits. So hours before class yesterday, I was in this epic battle with him where he had the challenge to just write, a few sentences. It was entirely, between you and me, it was like below grade level expectations, right? Just stuff that I know he can do it. He should be able to do it. He just doesn't like it. And I had to be that unmovable force for him to say, nope, this is not going to give. No matter what you do to flail about, this matters. I'm setting a boundary and I'm not going to let you cross it. And that is how you're going to grow and flourish. And he did it in the end. And he was proud of himself. But it was only after the fact that he could feel my love coming through in that setting of a boundary. So boundaries are what create the container to hold the radical expansiveness of divinity, which is unconditional. So I want to challenge you to set a boundary this week, at least one, and practice it and know that when you're doing it, know that it's divine. I'm going to send you another video introducing you to the Buddhist meditative practice that is known as metta practice. Metta is translated as loving kindness practice, Hesed. So it is a practice that we're borrowing from Buddhist tradition that lets us feel our way into Hesed. It is a practice where we simply offer well wishes to all kinds of recipients. So throughout the course of the week, we're going to offer our well wishes to people we love. We're going to practice offering them to people for whom it's a lot harder to feel our love. You can even offer well wishes to your enemies. We're going to offer well wishes to people that we might have otherwise not noticed, neutral people, right? I love doing metta practice when I'm in line at the supermarket, especially when I might be getting like kind of antsy or frustrated, that the line isn't moving forward, that the checker isn't moving fast enough. And I say, I tame those thoughts of judgment, and I counteract them with this posture of love, where I just send well wishes to this human being who's doing their best. And I might have forgotten to notice that they were a beautiful entity, a container of divine light created in the image of God. And so I practice that by sending them my well wishes in metta practice. And then we're going to do metta for ourselves. And we're going to we're going to direct well wishes to ourselves. You'll notice in the recording that I send out of metta practice that I have interspersed what are pretty traditional metta phrases. Now, interestingly, metta is the most widely researched posture of mindfulness practice. And so there's good evidence that it has positive impacts on those who do it in all kinds of ways, on basic physiological metrics in terms of lowering of stress hormones, lowering of heart rate, things like this, and on metrics of well-being. In terms of measured increases of well-being, we can see impacts of it on the brain when they put experienced meditators when they did brain scans of experienced meditators doing this practice. So it's so the phrases that I'm offering you are the tested phrases, but you'll see that I intersperse them with the priestly blessing, because the priestly blessing, which is one of our oldest parts, fragments of Torah, has the same idea that divinity is directing loving kindness towards us. And what's so beautiful about the priestly blessing is that it gives us this image of God's face shining down on us. So we can imagine God's countenance and our countenance and just receiving love from the divine face, just like we had in the Zohar poetry that I read you a few minutes ago. So metta is another practice that we're going to use this week to feel our way into these two sefirot. By the end of living with these sefirot this week, we will have created the body. We have the Vav, we have that Yud, spark of light, burst through the cosmic womb, which is Bina, shooting down through the Vav. And by next week, we're going to be ready to gather at the heart center and we're going to meet the I-ness, the self-consciousness of the divine, known as a Kadosh Baruch Hu. This is the aspect of God that we as separate beings direct our prayers to. We pick up the phone and we say, hey, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hey, it's me, Margaret, do you hear me? These are the things I need. I'm in the illusion of separate. I'm calling out to you. The I-ness of God is Kadosh Baruch Hu, the ferret at the heart center. And it's also our own I-ness. So next week's class is going to be pretty different. We're going to be entirely within the space of the heart center, and I'm going to offer a very different set of metaphors. So in your practice this week, I want you building the architecture of the body, feeling your way into all of those sefirot. That very first meditation, that nighttime into sleep meditation is still a really good one to be doing, because I need the full architecture of the 10 sefirot to be clear for you by the time we go deep into the heart center next week. All right, blessings for a beautiful and transformational week.